The Trump administration celebrating a huge political victory.
Senators are expected to confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh today.
Collins, Flake, and Democrat Joe Manchin all voted yes. Republican Lisa Murkowski joined with Democrats to vote no.
I will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
Conservatives are rallying behind her because she truly galvanized the vote.
This was a moment of courage for her. It was a historic moment on the Senate floor, and it shows that President Trump, of course, made the right decision in picking Judge Kavanaugh.
The United States Senate will also be making a statement. We'll either state that partisan politics can override the presumption of innocence, or we'll reaffirm that in the United States of America, everyone is innocent until proven guilty.
More than 100 anti-Brett Kavanaugh protesters are arrested as demonstrations continue to rage throughout Capitol Hill.
We cannot incite people to get up in faces, and somebody's going to get hurt.
It's mob rule. That is not what our country is about. We need to stand up.
Well, we did stand up. This is a Fox News alert. We're hours away from the confirmation vote for Judge Brett Kavanaugh. It should begin between 3:30 and 4 p.m. Eastern time, we're now hearing, and should last 15 to 20 minutes. That's a live look at the Senate floor as senators continue to speak within that 30-hour window. The outcome is expected to be 50 to 48, with Senator Lisa Murkowski, the only Republican, voting no by voting present. She will pair her vote with the absence of Senator Steve Daines, who's attending the wedding of his daughter in Montana. So big day coming on the Senate floor, Griff.
Good morning. And I'll tell you, as a father of two daughters, I would never want to be in Senator Daines' position.
That's for sure, right? So it was really nice of Senator Murkowski to do a favor for her colleague.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there aren't many moments where you're watching your television and you know, politics is usually fairly predictable.
Yes.
Yesterday wasn't. Everyone's watching Susan Collins on the floor. What's she going to say? Which way is she going to come down? Manchin hadn't yet said which way he's going to go. And ultimately, she gave a very powerful speech we're going to play some clips of. But the vote came out, and it was 51 to 49 yesterday, and is predicted today to be 50, 48 to 1. All you need is 50. To get Brett Kavanaugh confirmed.
Well, and I recall Jeff Flake actually said, well, you know, unless something really big happens, well, after the elevator thing, I got a little bit nervous, but I understand that the vice president is present, and just in case, there's a vote there as well.
He's the tiebreaker. He's the tiebreaker.
He'll be presiding. And Griff, you've talked a lot about this speech from Susan Collins. You know, some of us conservatives get frustrated that she's always waffling. But at a moment like this, sometimes you need that clarity of someone who tries to call balls and strikes. And she called out the left for what they did to impugn this nominee.
And, you know, Senator Collins, we got the heads up that she was going to tell us, you know, how she's going to go at 3 o'clock. But really what she was letting everybody know was that she was going to make an important speech. And so for our viewers, it may have been busy yesterday. It was late in the afternoon. You may have missed it. I want you just to hear a little bit of Susan Collins and what she had to say. Take a listen.
Judge Kavanaugh has received rave reviews for his 12-year track record as a judge. We must always remember that it is when passions are most inflamed that fairness is most in jeopardy. I do not believe that these charges can fairly prevent Judge Kavanaugh from serving on the court. I will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
Pete's making fun of me because I've got a crush on Susan Collins today, but it's because I'm pointing out the significance of what you just said there. We must always remember that when passions are most inflamed, that fairness is most in jeopardy. That is the moment of that speech. Greg Jarrett saying he thought it was the most significant he's ever heard in Washington. Strong words, but I believe it's going to be something by which we judge future nominees who may come under attack like Kavanaugh did.
And she's one of the most liberal senators on, on the Republican side, and yet she's the hero of the moment, really saving this nomination. And in a lot of ways, I mean, we know Lindsey Graham gave an impassioned speech, the one that Pete wants to put on a perpetual loop on Fox.
It's a testament of how to fight.
You're right. But this moment was so important because she does have a reputation of being somebody who is willing to look at both sides, of being bipartisan. And so she was the right messenger to clinch this moment.
No, I think you're right. Griff, if we're making fun of you for being in love with Susan Collins, you've been making fun of me for being in love with Mitch McConnell this morning. Because you have to give the Senate Majority Leader his due. He held a narrow caucus together. He navigated a system. This is his second Supreme Court nominee. He got tax reform done. He has learned how to work with a Republican Party that is led by Donald Trump.
That's right.
So a lot of these folks, Chuck Grassley, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, they deserve the credit for being there at the tough moments and ramming this thing through, as he said, for a highly qualified judge that was being smeared.
And when Donald Trump was elected, I remember telling my husband, listen, the most important thing that Donald Trump will do is he's going to teach Republicans how to fight. And it's been almost 2 years. We're seeing they know how to fight. And they also realize they're stronger united. This was a moment that united the Republican Party. No one got weak-kneed. No one gave in to the name-calling of you're a sexist and you're this and you're that. They withstood some of the worst insults by very organized and paid-for protesters on their way to the vote, and they stood strong and stood together.
And we had Mercedes Schlapp, senior advisor to the White House, a little bit earlier, who was saying that President Trump has actually talked to Judge Kavanaugh. Here's what Mercedes had to say.
The president did speak with Brett Kavanaugh. I know it's one of these moments, again, that I'm incredibly proud of working with this president who has stood by Judge Kavanaugh, has really made it a point to explain to the American people why Judge Kavanaugh is the right person at the right moment for the court.
Yeah, and if this right moment at this time, you step back to the 30,000-foot level for conservatives is what we've been hoping for and praying for a generation, which is a majority of jurists on the Senate who have fidelity to the Constitution, who believe in its original construction, and who are going to protect things like the Second Amendment and free speech and religious liberties and unborn babies, which is things a lot of people care about why they voted for this president. It's been delivered, will be delivered this afternoon. You got to take that victory lap. And you got to look at the folks that got you there. And a lot of these senators deserve a salute this morning.
Yeah, and this is tough news for Democrats to stomach, because now they are looking at this going, oh, man, we've got to fight, and we're not winning at the moment.
I replaced my coffee with liberal tears this morning.
Yeah.
Well, and, I point this out because I cover Congress. I think it's significant that the House, the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, Gerald Nadler of New York, right? Here is a quote I want to put up from him. He says that the Senate, having failed to do its proper constitutionally mandated job of advising consent, we are going to have to do something to provide a check and balance, to protect the rule of law, and to protect the legitimacy of one of our most important institutions. If the Democrats actually do win in the House and get the majority there, you can see Nadler getting out in front of this saying, we're going to investigate Supreme Court Judge Brett Kavanaugh.
Right, and he will become the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the House if the Democrats take over the House. And so this is a man who clearly has not read the Constitution, probably should do that between now and Election Day, because that is not how our Constitution works. It is the Senate who has advice and consent. And I tell you that, looking forward to November, the left, the Democrats were already pretty much as energized as you're going to get. I think that the Democrats did not anticipate that there would be what's now being called a Kavanaugh effect, that there are so many Republicans, so many independents, and even lean Democrats that are very troubled by what they saw in this process.
Well, the resistance has to continue somewhere because it's almost all they've had. They didn't accept the legitimacy of the president's election, and now they don't want to accept the legitimacy of Brett Kavanaugh. Right. So that's going to be litigated in the midterms. But I talk a lot about politics. We all talk a lot about politics. But the process has to matter. And if we're always asking for a do-over, then there's no validation in what actually happened. And I think Jonathan Turley made that point very well in the program earlier. Listen.
Sure, you could have a trial for the dead if you wanted, or the confirmed, but it is a dreadful idea. The framers created this process to have some finality. Now, the Democrats may not like the outcome of the vote, but over 50 senators are expected to be satisfied with this record and to confirm this nominee. If we're going to start to do do-overs every time the majority changes, then we will never have a stable court.
That's it.
Or a stable country, or a stable government. Yes, that's a great point.
No, it's a fantastic point. So if you're frustrated, go to the polls in November of 2018. If you're motivated, go to the polls in 2018. If you want that disaster on your television, investigations, do-overs, then vote for the Democrats, because that's what they're going to do. They want to impeach and they want to resist.
And
dirty tricks.
What if the Democrats start eating Snickers?
Whoa. I'm putting them all. I'm going to buy them all up and put them in my pocket. Mitch ate his Snickers, and we're proud of you, Mitch.
All right.
Go ahead.
I was just going to go. We got to go out. So I've covered protesters all week, and fortunately, a much better skilled reporter such as Jillian Turner is covering those protesters as they, I believe, were trying to get into the Senate. Good morning, Jillian. Where are you, and where are the protesters?
So, guys, I'm right in front of the Capitol building. At this hour, all the Senate buildings are closed to the public. I confirmed this just a short while ago with Capitol Hill Police here. As of now, the only way for members of the public and protesters to get inside any of the 3 Senate buildings is to have an appointment and be escorted by their senators. So we're not anticipating huge crowds inside the Senate buildings like we were yesterday. Most of the protesters are going to be outside. They've already started converging. You can see behind me there's a fairly large group. They pitched up just a few moments ago, chanting "Kavanaugh must go." They plan to be here for the next few hours, one of the organizers tell me. I've spent the last 24 hours, guys, talking to protesters of all stripes here on Capitol Hill. I want you to take a listen to what 2 of them had to say yesterday. This is interesting.
His credibility is spot on. I believe he is a man of God. I believe he is appointed and chosen by God.
These sexual allegations and his dishonesty during his testimony made me even more opposed and outraged. I do not see how we can let someone like him on the Supreme Court.
So today we're anticipating protesters organized by the Women's March, by Stop Kavanaugh, by Believe Survivors and Believe Women, but also a fairly robust presence, as was yesterday, from Women for Kavanaugh. I encountered hundreds of them yesterday all across the Senate buildings. They're going to be back here today, too. We'll keep you updated on everybody that's showing up.
Jillian Turner, great stuff.
Thanks, Jillian.
Thank
all
you.
over the latest. I think once the vote happens today, that the city in D.C. can say, just pull an Orrin Hatch and say, bye-bye. Remember in the elevator when he was waving at the protesters? Bye-bye to the protesters. It's over. You can't undo it.
But it's never over for them. And I think that's an important message. And by the way, I don't think the George Soros money has dried up. I think it's going to continue.
What will Alyssa Milano do next?
You keep us posted on that. All right, well, with Kavanaugh's chaotic confirmation battle finally headed to a close, has this fight made never-Trumpers that it turned them into deplorables? We're going to ask Jonah Goldberg about that and more coming up next.
Plus, Senator Sarah Palin, the former governor's warning shot for 2022. You don't want to miss this.
So makes me feel right at home. Bring it on, bring it on, bring the fire, bring the storm. All your love like a flood, raining down on me. Bring that light.
Well, with Judge Brett Kavanaugh's seemingly endless confirmation finally coming to a close later today, it makes you wonder, was the treatment of Kavanaugh a turning point for critics of President Trump? Joining us now is Fox News contributor Jonah Goldberg. Jonah, thanks for joining us this morning. So a lot of our viewers will know you were at one point a never-Trumper. You've since said, hey, I want to call balls and strikes. But this week there seemed to be a lot of folks who were not fans of the president having to at least acknowledge that, look, he's achieved a lot of the goals conservatives have had for decades.
Yeah, well, certainly on this, look, I mean, one of the things I think is often misunderstood about President Trump's list is that was imposed on him by a lot of Republican voters who were still skeptical of Donald Trump. And they said, look, the thing we care about most, other than Hillary Clinton losing, is the Supreme Court and getting judges into the judiciary that are our kind of judges. And so it was a brilliant move to basically say, hey, look, I know you don't completely trust me. Here's this list. They're all great. They come from the Federalist Society. And that probably won the election for him because it brought around the last sort of skeptical people. And that was a brilliant move. That's the list that he's been working on. And it points to the fact that conservatives have cared about reclaiming the Supreme Court for 40, 50 years now. It is a central idea that unites everybody who isn't, I mean, there are people like the Washington Post's Jen Rubin who've gone full tribal and gone crazy anti-Trump. But anybody who still considers themselves a conservative, even Susan Collins, cares about this. And that's why I think, because in a lot of ways it was bigger than Trump. It was bigger than the presidency. And that's what brought everybody sort of together. Also, the absolutely repugnant and witch hunt type tactics that the left used in this case was just so horrific that you had to make a choice.
Yeah, no, and Rachel's also made the point a couple of times this morning. I think it's an important one. This president has also taught conservatives how to fight and how to win. And in many other cases, there was a lot of hand-wringing over the particulars of certain policies at all times and not a lot of results. And in some ways, that seems to be the juxtaposition between Mitch McConnell in the Senate and Paul Ryan, who's retiring. I mean, do you feel like Republicans have been fortified because of this president?
I don't know about that one. Sorry.
No?
Look, I think Mitch McConnell, I think deserves an enormous amount of credit for doing this. He blocked Merrick Garland when Barack Obama was still president. Yep. He's an institutional fighter. He's the kind of guy who swims across a moat with a knife in his mouth. And he's been that way for a very, very long time. I think one of the moments that in the last 10 days, one of the moments that put this in jeopardy was when Donald Trump did what he did at that Mississippi rally. Because at that time, the three people who mattered most for this project were Susan Collins, Jeff Flake, and Lisa Murkowski, and that made them go wobbly. And so I understand the argument about how he fights, and I think it was very good that he stood by Brett Kavanaugh. But I'm not sure that this was an example of Trumpian fighting tactics winning the day. I think it had much more to do with the sort of inside the ring fighting tactics of Mitch McConnell getting this thing done.
Well, certainly a combination at the very least. So stepping back even though from this, you've got the Supreme Court, you've got tax cuts, you've got deregulation, you've got rebuilding of the military, a conservative grab bag of accomplishments. Will never-Trumpers or some of those acknowledge this and maybe be willing to vote for him in 2020? I mean, could we see that kind of result?
I certainly think, look, I mean, there are a lot of people who've come around to sort of being sort of pro-Trump, or at least acknowledge. I mean, I'm certainly happy to acknowledge I like a lot of those things. I think those things are great. I do think, though, that if you're talking about voters, attitudes about the president are pretty locked in. I mean, if you go by the standard political science model, Donald Trump's approval rating should be in the low 60s or at least high 50s, given where the economy is. But lots of voters have basically decided they don't care about that.
He's also got the media, though, and the institutions. Sure. I mean,
that's
massive headwinds. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. But my point is, people who say it's the economy is stupid, that's never been true. Or let me put it this way. It's been true every single time in every election except all the ones where it wasn't. And
good point.
So I think the problem is that Trump is such a large personality, it becomes difficult to sort of just use the standard scorecard for him. And so, the Kavanaugh thing has certainly brought a lot of Republicans back into the fold. It'll probably help with the Senate races. I don't know that it'll help with a lot of the House races the House needs to hold on to, because those are in more purplish districts. But look, it's very hard to predict.
Yeah, we shall see. Jonah Goldberg, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thank you.
You got it. All right, well, Republican Senator Bill Cassidy pushing back on protesters when he was confronted about Judge Kavanaugh. The senator joins us to discuss it live coming up. Plus, Dean Cain is here, so I'm told. Where is he? Is he? He is? Oh, come on in.
If you're crazy.
We're back with a Fox News alert moments ago. First Lady Melania Trump touring the Great Sphinx and pyramids in Egypt. She arrived in the country overnight, the fourth and final stop on her trip to Africa.
She looks amazing, by the way. That's an amazing outfit. Sorry, I had to say that.
Well, earlier this morning, she met with Egypt's president. It's her first solo overseas trip as First Lady. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arriving in Tokyo overnight for a meeting with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the top U.S. diplomat seeking unity in Japan just hours before heading to North Korea. Pompeo will leave for Pyongyang later today for critical talks with Kim Jong-un on denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. Rachel?
Senator Susan Collins standing up for justice in her defense of Brett Kavanaugh. Take a look.
Must always remember that it is when passions are most inflamed that fairness is most in jeopardy.
Griff's favorite, the media and the left subsequently melting down over her speech.
Here to react is Dean Cain, actor and executive producer of the new film Gosnell. Tell me about the film.
Well, we'll jump to the film right away. I'll do that in a heartbeat. It comes out October 12th. It tells the story of Kermit Gosnell. But the one thing I was going to say about that is that, the things you hear people saying and the way they're reacting reminds me of a certain election in 2016 when all of a sudden everybody was screaming and screaming and screaming. He just keeps winning.
After Inauguration Day, you're right. So here's a couple of the screams we heard as a result of this. So the Women's March, we just made reference to that. They put this picture and this tweet out after the vote. Senator Susan Collins, rape apologist. I don't know how you could listen to that 43-minute speech and draw that conclusion. Rob Reiner also tweeting this. Susan Collins turns her back on women who have been traumatized by sexual assault. Elections have consequences to start turning the ship of state back toward the rule of law, decency, truth, and the preservation of democracy. November 6th has to be a lot more than a blue wave vote. So rape apologist.
I've been
Susan
called that
Collins.
too. I've been called that too. And, you know, my sister and my mother both suffered from much worse sexual assaults than that. And I'm anything but a rape apologist. So to hear that, that kind of rhetoric, that kind of inflammatory language is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous and has no place in politics. But that's why things are getting so partisan and they're getting so crazy.
I don't think it's working. I mean, I think
it doesn't work.
You know, remember we saw the war on women way back when Hillary Clinton was running. I just don't think it's working anymore. I think that, frankly, Donald Trump has something to do with that. I mean, he's just said, you know, and he actually sent out a tweet. Don't let these protesters get under your skin to the senators. Stand strong. They're all paid for by George Soros. Don't give in.
Well, and they're chasing them through the halls of the Senate, and throwing them at a restaurant. It's just that is not. I don't think that's very, very good behavior,
Dean,
if you will.
Let me ask you this, because we played Susan Collins' speech, and as Pete's pointing out, I'm a big fan of it. Greg Jared said he thought it was
I was trying to watch it, but I had to come over here.
How do you think the rest of the country, because what she was talking about really was larger than Brett Kavanaugh, do you think the rest of the country perceived it that way?
Well, perhaps we're going to find out in the midterms. You know, I think we're going to find out in the midterms. And if it's not a blue wave, then I guess you'll know your answer. And if people show up, it may have energized Republicans more than anybody. The behavior of the Democrats during this whole confirmation, the very poor behavior of the Democrats during this confirmation time.
Absolutely. I think part of the reason for the fever pitch is the issue of Roe v. Wade, and abortion is on the table with this switch in the wave of the Supreme Court. You've got a powerful film new out as Griff alluded to. Tell us about it.
All right, it's called Gosnell. It tells the story of Kermit Gosnell. He was an abortion clinic doctor in Philadelphia, and about 2011, he got busted. It was a drug bust, actually. And when they went in there, I played Detective Jim Wood, who's the real guy who went in there, and they found he had a bit of a dispute with his medical waste company, so he had medical waste there. Inside this sort of house of horrors is what they call it.
I think we have a clip.
Yeah, well, we have a clip. Good. Well, it'll tell you everything I won't tell you.
They're looking for anything that looks like drugs or paraphernalia.
Philadelphia Police Department, we have a search warrant.
What is that smell? Man, you got to see this. Is this normal?
I don't know. I've never been in an abortion clinic before.
Those things we were looking at there, by the way, were jars with the baby's feet.
Baby parts. I mean, you're really, this film,
horrific.
This is really pulling the curtain back on what really happens
and some
in
of
these butcher houses.
That place hadn't been inspected in 17 years.
Gosnell, it's the untold story of America's most prolific serial killer. And if you understand what abortion is, it's a fitting subtitle.
Well, yeah, and he was inducing birth. He was inducing births with live children. You know, at 20 weeks, you're 50% viability. 26 weeks is 90%. He was doing it after 24 weeks, which was the legal time in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. 24 weeks, he was probably doing 3 or 4 a day.
What's been the reaction from Hollywood? I mean, this is you're Superman to me for reals now, Dean, because this is a really courageous professional move for you.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I'm pro-choice, and everyone said it's a pro-life movie. I'm pro-choice to a point, to viability, and I've gotten a lot of heat for even saying that. But we're not taking a stance on that issue. We're just telling the story of what happened.
But they don't want the story told.
No, they don't. But no, they don't want to say the word abortion. Yeah. They say women's reproductive rights, and so it's been a really tough. We had to raise the money on Indiegogo. We couldn't find distribution. We made the film 2 years ago. Right. We wanted it to come out earlier.
So why did you want to do it?
Wow. It's a great story. It's an amazing story, and it needed to be told. I mean, there are horrific things happening all over the country.
Next Friday is it?
Friday, October 12th, in like the 750 theaters nationwide. If it goes well, and please go out and see it, then it'll expand.
So Gosnell hits theaters. Roll it for me nationwide, October 12th. What's the website again?
Gosnellmovie.com.
Gosnellmovie.com.
Support this movie. Great job.
Thank you.
Great job, Dean.
Come by more often, will you?
I will.
He's an international man of mysteries.
He is.
Can't get him here very often, but
I love
anytime you're in
coming
the
by.
city, you better come by.
We'll come by and see a Minnesota Vikings game someday.
No.
We'll find out which team is playing that
Don't
game.
talk about it.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
All right. And we're hours away from the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh as Supreme Court Justice. Tammy Bruce, Candace Owen, they're both here live to tell us why this confirmation will be a victory for not letting the protest mobs win.
There they are.
There they are.
Rocket into the night, rocket into
you would like to go to an office, to spend time with your senator,
Summoned to vote. Let's go watch the vote. In offices that you wish to communicate with. I am going to go to Heidi Heitkamp's office.
Why? She's on our side.
She's on our side. That's not fake video. That's real protesters preparing to go to the wrong offices. But you know what good TV is? Just bring in interesting people. Tammy Bruce, Fox News contributor and president of Independent Women's Voice, and Candace Owens, communications director for Turning Point USA. They were going to be on at different times, and then we're like, just put them on together.
Yes,
way better. So we saw lots of glimpses of the mob, Candace. I'll start with you. Yet they did not win. Why?
Because America's getting really tired of this. It's petulant, it's childish, the idea that we no longer have a due process. You're going to show up, say some allegations, shout, hold a bunch of picket signs, and you're just going to bring America to its knees. No, we have the right president in office, and thankfully we have the right senators to have them stand up and say this no longer works. This country is not ruled by mob justice.
Tammy, I'm still in shock after seeing that video. Are Democrats embarrassed of that kind of weird, robotic, I don't know, groupthink? I mean, repeating things like that.
Well, literally, right, to see it in its face. That's not unusual. That's what's always happened.
But are they embarrassed?
No, because that's what they do. This is what they're used to. So this is literally, I mean, they treat them obviously like they're infants or like you've got to have a little kid repeat what they're doing. But that's a training mechanism when you talk literally about groupthink. And it's like a pledge. And it really eliminates the nature of suggesting independent thought, because that's the problem when you eventually get there. And I think that what Americans saw when they see elements like this, and it's invaluable now, everybody's got the cell phones and we can actually see how this works, is Americans, they saw it in 2016 and the years through Obama, and that they saw it with the Kavanaugh hearings, is that something truly has gone off the rails, that this is something that we must stand up against. And the issues, though, too, of course, this is only the beginning. And it's important work, right? This is our D-Day. And it's going to be hard. Right. Other Americans and other generations have faced even more dangerous and more hard. Absolutely. But this is ours, and we must step up for it.
I want to get your
great analogy.
I want to get your reaction. So, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made it very clear that he is going to not stand for it. Here's McConnell on the protesters.
The mob was not able to intimidate the Senate. We stood up to the mob. We did the right thing for a good man. I filled a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court. There's a lot to celebrate today. I couldn't be prouder of all of my members.
Your reaction to what will be a historic vote today at 3:30, Candace?
I'm just really excited. I'm so relieved. I think this is an interesting point because at long last we are addressing what I have described as radicalized feminism. This has gotten bad. It's gotten worse. When Hillary ran, we saw it kind of emerging and then it grew rapidly. And it's time to take a stand to it. I'm worried. I don't have any children. I don't have a son, but I do like to think about the world that I am creating for my someday children. And to see it get to this point where you're just saying, believe women, like women have never done anything wrong in the history of the world, is terrifying for me. And to see these senators stand up on a stage and say, we will not allow this. We will not be bullied. We will not be silenced. We are going to stand by a good man. Congratulations to Brett Kavanaugh.
But we've also seen conservative women stand up for men. And I think sometimes it's really hard if you're a man to stand up to this kind of insults. You're so afraid of what they're going to say. It does require women to stand up.
It does, but also for men to know that they're standing up for their daughters also.
That's true.
That they're standing up for the future of the women in their family. And I know men have no problem doing that. So it's a matter of a frame of mind. Don't let the mob control what you think your point of view is about the reality of this situation. By the way, if anybody told me a month ago I'd be praising and standing up for McConnell and Graham and Collins, I would have said you were crazy. Right. But this tells us, and I've got a column at foxnews.com suggesting that maybe it's time for the GOP establishment to put down its fists and to join us and for us to work together to keep America great. Because we've seen what we can do when we work together. Susan Collins has proven that to us. So is McConnell. So is Graham. Isn't it time to now for the establishment to come together and help us move forward?
It was a great column. I read it this morning.
You mentioned Susan Collins. So talking about men standing up to women, Senator Chris Murphy on another channel just took Susan Collins to task and Judge Kavanaugh. Listen to what he had to say.
I have a great amount of respect for Senator Collins, but I just think she is going to be sorely disappointed when a year from now Brett Kavanaugh writes the decision overturning Roe v. Wade. But it's going to be pretty embarrassing when Brett Kavanaugh is the deciding vote to criminalize abortion in this country.
Candace, your thoughts?
Well, I'm from Connecticut, so if you want to talk about embarrassing, we can talk about his leadership in Connecticut as a whole. Connecticut is sinking on he's got way bigger fish to fry than Susan Collins. Connecticut is a sinking ship. Our economy is collapsing. It's because it is being led by weak men like him.
Let me tell you, she dismantled every argument like that last night beautifully. She left it on the floor. All of the hysteria that Kavanaugh was going to be some kind of nuclear ideological bomb. She obliterated those arguments, and yet he falls right back into that. The fact is, the reason the American people are shocked at this is because they've seen that they were right in 2016. They saw all the predictions about Trump were lies and did not happen. They're seeing this as false. It is a false reality. Many people on the left have been used to being able to recreate our reality for us, kind of gaslighting the American people. We've been able to overcome that. We'll do it again.
And gaslighting is the right word.
You're right. But also, when she laid it out, it was a reminder also to some, very conservative people like myself that, this Brett Kavanaugh wasn't exactly our first pick for the Supreme Court. He was the establishment pick. He was Donald Trump's pick. But the abortion debate is not a cut and dry with Kavanaugh. He's a constitutionalist. That's why.
But even when you talk about gaslighting the American people, even bringing up the abortion debate, this is exactly the tactics they use time and time again. And when you said this is what we went through with the election of Donald Trump, right?
When I started my activism decades ago, it was on that issue. And this is now the 21st century. American women have different options. We are more in control of our lives. We have agency. This argument continues to place us in the position as infants and as powerless. We are not, whether you are liberal or conservative, this is a nonpartisan issue. We must be able to maintain control of our lives. And all of this argument putting us as victims perpetually on this one issue continues now to be false as we move into the future.
Tammy, Bruce, Candace Owens, thank you. Pete was right. You are a good teammate.
This is like the most empowering segment.
It's a big day. This is D-Day.
It is a big day.
It's D-Day. It begins.
But I thought you were talking about November is D-Day too. November is
It's a battle in this Reformation. All of these are battles.
Defend our men, confirm Brett Kavanaugh. That's all I have to say.
Candace, Tammy, thank you very much. Still to come, Republican Senator Bill Cassidy pushing back on protesters when confronted about Judge Kavanaugh.
And why wouldn't I support Kavanaugh?
Because rapists are bad.
Because wait a second, everybody there said that it did not happen.
Senator Cassidy joins us live. That's coming up.
Plus, the biggest winners and losers from the Kavanaugh confirmation battle. Your emails have been pouring in. We gave you our picks. Now you are going to give us yours. Straight ahead on this network and show. Welcome back. A couple of quick headlines for you. A Senate run could be in Sarah Palin's future. The former Alaska governor tweeting this, quote, "Hey, Lisa Murkowski, I can see 2022 from my house." Famous reference there. Palin appearing to challenge potentially incumbent Senator Murkowski after she voted no to a measure to end debate on Judge Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination. The Alaska Republican is up for re-election after her term ends in 2023. That would be a heck of a face-off.
Yeah, it would.
And liberal New York City mayor, ultra-liberal New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is caught blowing off a homeless activist who interrupts his workout.
Why won't you come in more?
In your affordable housing program, only 5% will go to house the homeless. Can you look me in the eye?
That activist demanding that de Blasio create more affordable housing for homeless people like her. For example, apartments available through the city's affordable housing program requires applicants to earn nearly $200,000 a year. Rachel.
Thank you, Pete. Now, the Senate just hours away from its final vote on Judge Brett Kavanaugh after a months-long confirmation battle.
So here to weigh in on today's vote and someone who will be voting is Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Senator, good morning. This is quite a historic day. What are your thoughts?
It is an incredibly historic day. My thoughts are that under normal circumstances, we'd be celebrating how talented a jurist Brett Kavanaugh is. But because of the circus the left has made of this, we have had all this other debate. But Brett Kavanaugh will be an outstanding jurist, and he will be approved today.
So no concerns at all. This is, in your mind, going to be a done deal on the Senate floor.
Yeah, that vote yesterday really was key, and obviously we had a margin there, and we'll continue to have a good margin, and so he is going to be confirmed today.
Senator, you guys have had quite a lot of protesters on the Senate side there, and you've had to push back on some. We're going to take a look at what you did here.
And why wouldn't I support Kavanaugh?
Because rapists are bad.
Because wait a second, everybody there said that it did not happen.
So you're okay as a doctor to harm a woman?
Wait a second. Are you okay as a person to go ahead and to accept a non-corroborated charge to destroy someone's life? Uncorroborated. That's to answer the question. I don't think you're able to. Because you know it's unfair.
So you're pushing back pretty hard. Good for you. But is that the right tactic?
I don't know if it's the right tactic. There's a scripture: "Don't throw your pearls before swine." She's not. I'm not calling her a swine. I'm just pointing out that sometimes you give somebody information that they just cannot intellectually accept. But I think the tactic she used was exactly that used by many people on the left, mindlessly repeating uncorroborated charges despite the evidence against those charges. And you've got to push back against that.
Yes.
Our society can't be about slurs destroying somebody's life.
And Senator, what do you make of your colleague, Senator Booker, at one point during this entire process, encouraging those activists to do just that? The video we were showing is, of course, you're fully well aware of the Russell subway entrance, just chasing you down, trying to influence you with what are special interest group talking points.
Yeah, incredibly irresponsible, because obviously we have recent experience showing that somebody who's crazed may hear that and act in a deadly fashion. And again, from Louisiana, I'm particularly aware of Steve Scalise, a real hero back home, a real hero nationally for how he overcame that. But that's somebody who's unhinged, who's just flipped over, and anyone that encourages that is, again, being incredibly irresponsible.
Absolutely.
Senator, good for you for standing up. A lot of people have been wanting to see that amongst Republicans, and great to see that.
And a good reminder that we did nearly have an execution of a dozen members of the Republican Party on that baseball field. It is irresponsible. Thank you so much for calling that to attention, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
All right. Now, the biggest winners and losers from the Kavanaugh confirmation battle, your emails have been pouring in about our big picks. We're going to see what you say next.
Welcome back. A couple of quick headlines for you. A Senate run could be in Sarah Palin's future. The former Alaska governor tweeting this, quote, "Hey, Lisa Murkowski, I can see 2022 from my house." Famous reference there. Palin appearing to challenge potentially incumbent Senator Murkowski after she voted no to a measure to end debate on Judge Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination. The Alaska Republican is up for re-election after her term ends in 2023. That would be a heck of a face-off.
Yes, it would.
And liberal New York City Mayor, ultra-liberal New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is caught blowing off a homeless activist who interrupts his workout.
Why won't you commit more? In your affordable housing program, only 5% will go to house the homeless. Can you look me in the eye?
That activist demanding that de Blasio create more affordable housing for homeless people like her. For example, apartments available through the city's affordable housing program requires applicants to earn nearly $200,000 a year. Rachel.
Thank you, Pete. Now, the Senate just hours away from its final vote on Judge Brett Kavanaugh after a months-long confirmation battle.
So here to weigh in on today's vote and someone who will be voting is Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Senator, good morning. This is quite a historic day. What are your thoughts?
It is an incredibly historic day. My thoughts are that under normal circumstances, we'd be celebrating how talented a jurist Brett Kavanaugh is. But because of the circus the left has made of this, we have had all this other debate. But Brett Kavanaugh will be an outstanding jurist, and he will be approved today.
So no concerns at all. This is, in your mind, going to be a done deal on the Senate floor.
Yeah, that vote yesterday really was key, and obviously we had a margin there, and we'll continue to have a good margin, and so he is going to be confirmed today.
Senator, you guys have had quite a lot of protesters on the Senate side there, and you've had to push back on some. We're going to take a look at what you did here.
And why wouldn't I support Kavanaugh?
Because rapists are bad.
Because wait a second, everybody there said that it did not happen.
So you're okay as a doctor to harm a woman?
Wait a second. Are you okay as a person to go ahead and to accept a non-corroborated charge to destroy someone's life? Uncorroborated. Answer the question. I don't think you're able to, because you know it's unfair.
So you're pushing back pretty hard. Good for you. But is that the right tactic?
I don't know if it's the right tactic. There's a scripture: "Don't throw your pearls before swine." She's not. I'm not calling her a swine. I'm just pointing out that sometimes you give somebody information that they just cannot intellectually accept. But I think the tactic she used was exactly that used by many people on the left, mindlessly repeating uncorroborated charges despite the evidence against those charges. And you've got to push back against that.
Yes.
Our society can't be about slurs destroying somebody's life.
And Senator, what do you make of your colleague, Senator Booker, at one point during this entire process, encouraging those activists to do just that? The video we were showing is, of course, you're fully well aware of the Russell subway entrance, just chasing you down, trying to influence you with what are special interest group talking points.
Yeah, incredibly irresponsible. Incredibly irresponsible. Because obviously we have recent experience showing that somebody who's crazed may hear that and act in a deadly fashion. And again, from Louisiana, I'm particularly aware of Steve Scalise, a real hero back home, a real hero nationally for how he overcame that. But that's somebody who's unhinged, who's just flipped over, and anyone that encourages that is, again, being incredibly irresponsible.
Absolutely.
Senator, good for you for standing up. A lot of people have been wanting to see that amongst Republicans, and great to see that.
And a good reminder that we did nearly have an execution of a dozen members of the Republican Party on that baseball field. It is irresponsible. Thank you so much for calling that to attention, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
All right. Now, the biggest winners and losers from the Kavanaugh confirmation battle, your emails have been pouring in about our big picks. We're going to see what you say next.